What is something you think people in the throes of drug addiction need to know?
I didn't have a home, didn't have a job. That was the first time when I started actually seriously considering.
From homelessness to founder of a global movement, this is Brooke Bowman.
Brooke, founder of Vibecamp, Ms. Bowman's finishing school for the socially inept.
And the force behind the Network Society Camp.
You seem very easygoing on camera and easy to talk to.
I called 911 at one point to inform them that aliens were eating my friends in the park. And there's like 7 cops with like assault weapons aimed at us. I hadn't believed in love. And then I met somebody that caused me to believe in love. And I just sat on my phone and I read about domestic violence for like 2 days. And it was the thing that finally got me away from him was reading an article that said that
Desiree podcast. Brooke Bowman.
hello. Thank you for having me.
How are you? Very good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm doing well. I have been very busy, but I'm living a fun life.
I want to start you off on a tricky question. What is something you think people in the throes of drug addiction need to know, but won't understand or accept?
I think my answer for that would probably vary depending on my mood and what I've been thinking about. But right now it's something like you have to have a purpose. And maybe even before that starts with like finding out what you actually really enjoy. I think that, there are things that give us sort of like that addictive temporary feeling of happiness, but there's lots of other things. I think we lose sight of the other things that fill us with joy. And I just didn't even know. I mean, for many years, I thought that I liked all sorts of things that I didn't like. I thought I was kind of a different person than I actually was. And it took really just like, I am just going to do the things that I didn't have a home, didn't have a job. I was homeless during that time or some of it. And I started, I would make up little stories about the people whose trash I found in the dumpsters, or I would set myself tasks. I would try to like concoct a snack out of the things I found in the next 3 dumpsters, or I would remember finding these little butterflies, and I went and snuck them all over the shopping cart of this guy named Demon, and just left it there as a surprise for him. And so there was, and I would sing walking down the street. I used to find headphones in the trash all the time, the really nice ones. And I sort of just started doing the things that were fun and kept doing the things that were fun. And I have found since that when I stop doing the things that are fun, my life collapses real quick.
Wow. You made yourself missions. That's incredible.
I didn't have much else going on.
Yeah. Wow. That's one of the benefits of homelessness, actually, now that you say it.
I mean, it is if you have whatever weird things that happened to my brain that made me do that. But I think the kind of missions my friends were going on were not similarly wholesome.
Yeah. Incredible. You really made I wonder if that's part of one of the secrets of how you got better. Do you think that was responsible largely for your recovery?
Yes, with the caveat that I think that something kind of fundamental shifted in my brain and the way that I perceived the world in order for me to start doing that in the first place. I know that's kind of like a tantalizing hint there, and I can go into that story, but I don't know how to tell the story of like how my brain changed without going into some detail.
All right. Do you want to start at the beginning then?
The beginning of what? Which? How?
Start with your.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do you want to even start with your childhood?
Oh, wow.
How? I mean, do you think these things? I mean, it's all linked. It's all one. Start with your childhood. I'm very interested.
I mean, I started out a weird kid. When I was 4, I think 3, I was in this local harvest festival thing, this competition. It was a personality contest, basically. And I was the youngest one there. All the other girls were 4. And they asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. And one by one, they went down the line and each little girl kind of whispered, like, I want to be a princess, or I want to be Princess Jasmine. And they get to me and I want to be a donkey, is what I yelled quite loudly. So I started out a little kooky, and then I just never felt like I quite fit in anywhere. So I think kind of like one of the biggest projects, if not the biggest project of my life, has just been figuring out why my brain is the way it is. Not in any legitimately scientific way, but just in thinking a lot about why I do what I do, making predictions, seeing how they match up, having lots of conversations with people and figuring out why they do what they do. And my life post-childhood can almost be broken up into a series of arcs depending on which was my primary drug at the time. I started out with MDMA, which went a long way towards healing some, the light just turned off mysteriously.
That was your first drug, MDMA.
Yeah,
How old were you?
17, 18.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I tend to not do things in half measures, is sort of a, so I'm going to do a thing.
All the way.
Yeah. I think that my first real drug experience was snorting most of 2.5 hits of pure MDMA in a bathroom at some party in high school. But it was accidentally therapeutic. We did a lot of cuddling, a lot of just like talking about how wonderful we thought each other were and things like that. And it was really good for my self-esteem and made me comfortable around people and like people in a way that I hadn't for many years.
You're so you seem so extroverted and easy to get along with. You're saying this wasn't throughout your whole life. This was found in some way.
I think that to some degree, my compassion for and empathy for people was hidden for a long time. I mean, when I was young, when I was high school, I was fairly antisocial. Not in the sense that I was like actively going out of my way to cause damage to people's lives, but I didn't really like people very much. I wasn't very happy. I didn't, I had a personal space bubble you could see. Didn't let people very close to me. And it was, I had a friend that didn't even know the first time I tried MDMA. A couple days later, he saw me. He's like, "You seem different." It was just an immediate change in my presence and my comfort level around people. But then college was cocaine. And this is one of the things that is sort of tricky when I talk about, what happened later to get me off of the street when my life really crashed, because it wouldn't have happened without this maybe 2-year stretch in college where I was doing cocaine. I consider that to have been my real education. And you can stop me at any point if I am talking too long, or if you'd like me to speed up.
I'm interested in the education. I've never heard cocaine being an educator before, but I'm interested.
Yeah, we didn't go out clubbing or partying or dancing or anything. I had a small group of friends. Sometimes it was just one friend in particular, and we would talk sometimes for like 3 days straight about the same kind of thing I mentioned before, like figuring out why we were doing what we were doing, coming up with like guesses as to like, our motivations, our underlying motivations, trying to understand ourselves and other people. I look like
Did you ever question why you were doing cocaine?
Do you, I'm not sure I understand exactly what you're getting at with that question.
Oh, when you said you would do cocaine, you talked for 3 days about why you were doing what you were doing. Were you ever questioning, like, why are we doing these drugs?
Yeah. Oh, I frequently would think about like whether or not I was gaining enough to be worth the consequences of what I was doing, because I was missing a lot of school and that kind of thing. Sometimes be very, very tired at work, and there would be times when I was like, okay, that stretch, I did not learn anything about myself. That was not worth what I just did to my life. But many of them were worth it. And I sort of, this feels, I get uncomfortable talking about this, but at the time, in my hubris of my youth, I had sort of developed what at a certain point, all these sort of discrete insights sort of coalesced in my mind, and it became like one thing. And when I had access to that one thing, I couldn't when I wasn't on cocaine. It was like I could remember this way of thinking of the world, this way of feeling and understanding it, but I couldn't access it unless I was high. And when I could access it, and it would last for a few days after too, my life was magical. I felt like I had like figured out something, and it. Well, I'll get back to that. So I'm getting a little nervous now talking about this because it sounds kind of crazy. But yeah,
that's okay. You can be. It's probably telling you something.
So at the time, I felt like I had like kind of come up with a way to like tangibly reduce suffering in the world. And that was like going to be the thing, the project of my life was to kind of like write that book and figure it out. And I think part of what ended up pushing me into heroin and sort of long, slow slide of depression was I was never able to communicate the whole thing to anyone. So I was kind of like, am I just being crazy? Is this one of these like drug fueled insights that doesn't have any relation to reality? Like if it is a real thing, why can't I communicate it to anybody? And I sort of gave up trying, moved out of the city that I'd been living in with a boy that I dated for many years, after that. And he didn't do cocaine. And I sort of stopped talking about these things, stopped thinking about them. And after a while, they just sort of, I didn't think about them for many years until.
Did you stop doing cocaine?
Yeah. For this maybe 2-3 years, 3 tops, nearly daily, and then I was done. But then I moved on to heroin. Now that's the heroin phase of my life.
On to heroin.
Yeah, heroin isn't very exciting. I just didn't do anything with my life for about the next decade. Not quite decade, almost decade. I was working at Chipotle or other restaurants, and I hadn't believed in love. And then I met somebody that caused me to believe in love and marriage and all those things. And I was like, this is it. This is more important than anything. And I stopped doing anything else. I stopped, I just kind of stagnated, and our worlds sort of became insular, and we didn't really like have enough of our own lives and things going on. I think he was kind of waiting for me to quit heroin, and I didn't realize how much was bothering him. I didn't realize kind of how much my life was just grinding to a halt. Then he ended up breaking up with me, and that was towards the end of my 20s. And that's kind of like precipitated like a pretty extreme slide into closer to real depression, and I had some health issues. I wasn't eating enough. I've seen some of my blood work from that time. It was pretty bad. And I ended up getting some kind of, I don't know if it was mono or something. I remember I looked pregnant. My belly was like distended. And then just after that, my housemates all moved out, and I didn't have a plan for housing. I was just kind of sleeping in my car half the week, and half the week I was staying at his house because we were still sleeping together even after breaking up, which didn't help anything.
No, it never helps.
Yeah. And I woke up the day after they moved out, and I couldn't sit up in his bed. He nearly called the ambulance. I had a really extreme sciatica. The way where when I got a CT scan, I was screaming. I've never screamed in pain like that before. And I have 2 techs lift me up, and I stopped being able to work, ran out of vacation pay, and that was the first time when I started actually seriously considering suicide in my life, because there was no chance I wanted to live my life in that kind of pain. It hurt to cough. It hurt to turn my head. It would take 10, 20 minutes to walk a few steps. So I was staying in my car. My tire fell off, and then the pain was getting better, but at that point I was pretty unwell psychologically. And
sometimes I think that there's such a connection between the mind and the body that if you hit enough of a rock bottom, your body starts to rebel in order to tell you like, and I've had experiences, I don't drink anymore, but I've had experiences with drinking in the past where I would do something stupid, and then the next day my unconscious, it's hard to communicate how I sort of communicate with my unconscious, but my unconscious would tell me like, it'll just get worse next time you drink, like maybe not next time or the next time after that, but at some point it's going to get worse, and we're just going to keep leveling up until you stop. Like this is, and your body will just rebel. Your mind will rebel. And I sometimes wonder how these illnesses manifest, and whether sometimes they're just your body telling you that things have to change.
Yeah. And just as a side note, I had pretty pretty bad back pain for a lot of my life. I got some, slip discs when I was fishing in Alaska and other things. And that was one of the reasons why I justified the continued heroin use. Because when I would quit, it would, my back pain got a lot worse. And magically, that has been gone since I began managing my stress better. I just have no chronic pain anymore.
That's incredible. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Wow. There's definitely self-medication there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
George Soros has this book called The Alchemy of Finance, and he talks about how when he looks at his stock portfolio and something is wrong, he's making the wrong decision, his back starts to hurt terribly.
Whoa.
So whenever his back is hurting, he knows that he needs to go change one of his stocks around.
Huh.
He's like one of the most successful investors in the world.
That's fascinating. That's really interesting.
Yeah. All right. So I believe you were living in your car at this time.
Yep.
And,
And a series of shenanigans. My tire fell off, and at this point I could walk a little bit better. I think I was still experiencing some nerve pain, but I realized I was going to be homeless very soon because my car was going to get towed, and I should go make friends with homeless people. And around the same time, at this point, I had been mainlining fentanyl. I had leveled up from black tar heroin for a year or two, I think, and my fentanyl dealer stopped picking up his phone right around when the tire fell off. And so I went to the library where I had seen homeless people charging their phones and went and befriended one of them. And I remember my dealer had accidentally given me crystal meth one time instead of fentanyl when I had been dope sick, and it helped with the symptoms. Or it was maybe it's cocaine. I don't remember what it was. But this guy had meth because everybody on the street uses meth. And so I used some of that initially for the withdrawal. And out with him one night, maybe a day or two after I was like, okay, I'm homeless now, I met somebody who at the time, I don't know, I felt like I had never met somebody I had as much in common with as this person. We liked the same music. We liked the same books and movies, and we could like quote weird medical factoids at each other. And I spent a week with this guy doing crystal together. And all of those kind of like thoughts back from college started coming back up now that I was doing it up again. And we talked about it. It was the first time I had talked to anybody about any of those things in a decade. And I didn't have withdrawal symptoms. That was one thing that is maybe not everybody knows. And even some heroin users, I think, don't accept, is that I only really experienced withdrawal when I didn't want to quit. I've had a number of times where there was something that I wanted to do more than heroin, and I didn't get sick in the way that I would otherwise. I mean, it feels...
Okay, wait. So if you find a purpose, if you find something kind of greater than yourself, you could just quit with no withdrawal symptoms.
Roughly, I don't know that those are the words that I would use, but like there was one time I quit to go fishing in Alaska, and I really wanted to do that, and I loved being up there, and I mean I didn't give myself time to taper off at all. I just went up there, and my withdrawal symptoms were really mild, and that happened a couple times where I was doing something that I wanted more than I wanted heroin. And the times when I was quitting because I'd gotten arrested or because I wanted to quit for my partner or whatever, my withdrawal symptoms were quite severe. And it's the point. I mean, I don't know if you know much about withdrawal, but you are throwing up bile. Your eyes are leaking, your nose is leaking, you have chills, all that stuff goes away. It just doesn't happen.
Is this is heroin withdrawal?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. And you get, I've heard people get like, it's like a flu or something, right?
It's
okay.
flu-like symptoms. I don't think that doing meth would have been enough to get rid of all of my symptoms like that. I think it was that I was so excited to be talking about these things and just spending this time with this guy, and somebody kind of gets it, and I'm back in that mode. And the problem was that it didn't get rid of all of my symptoms. I was not able to sleep for, I don't know, my sense of time from that period is off. I remember it being something like 6 days or more, possibly as many as 9. That seems crazy. I don't think that, I mean, that's the number I had in my head, but that seems not likely. Anyway, I when I'd been doing cocaine in college, I would take Benadryl at night when I had to work the next day, and that would make me sleep. And it just didn't occur to me. I would just lay there every night while he slept, and I'd write in my journal, and I'd listen to music, and I didn't sleep. And I remember there was a day when I started getting auditory hallucinations. I would answer questions that people hadn't asked and things of that nature. And then it went into the pretty severe psychosis for 4 days, something like that. I called 911 at one point to inform them that aliens were eating my friends in the park. I still remember quite vividly what those aliens looked like. They were pretty cool. They were like these big scorpion looking. I mean, they were massive, huge, like 9 feet long. I don't know. And they had these big tails, and they would kind of do this Mortal Kombat thing where they would rip people's like spines out of, and then there were these like,
and they were, you see your friends were in the park with you and they were eating your friends.
Yeah, they were killing everybody
in front of you.
Yeah. It turned out it was just a bush with some shadows. But I could see it.
It's easily confused. Yeah.
But there were these posts, these big wooden posts in this park, and I could hear the sound. They did this kind of like meeting call with the skulls on the post. And it was actually like would have been a cool movie.
Amazing.
Yeah.
How did 911 react? Do you remember?
They were so annoyed with me. The EMTs came down and they went and looked. And
they came down.
They were not.
One day we're gonna find the aliens.
They were not pleased with me.
All right. Well, they keep getting away before we get there.
No.
All right. Cool. Amazing.
Yeah. So that was deeply unpleasant in itself. Feeling like I didn't have access. Like I would come back into lucidity every once in a while and realize what had been going on. And that was another moment where I was like, am I even going to be lucid for long enough to kill myself? And, you know, and there was one night that bad things happened. Sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, go on. No, bad things happen, please.
Yeah. I don't think I want to get too explicit on that podcast people are just listening to for fun. But the guy that I had spent that week with realized what was happening, and he didn't have the skills or capacity he was homeless too, using drugs. He couldn't take care of me. And so he left me around some people who took advantage of my compromised state in a way that was pretty damaging. And so that's having, and I think that part of what was so hard and contributed to me just kind of shutting my brain off for a long time when I moved from where I'd been doing the cocaine, which was Santa Cruz, to LA, was that, I had this beautiful thing and then I didn't have access to it anymore. And then it was magnified because I'd had this week of just, it was amazing talking to this person about these things, and we were connecting, and I felt like I was rekindling my what had been my purpose in life, and then losing that, and in such a way where, I felt like maybe there's something he could have done had circumstances been different to like help prevent what happened. Then I was extraordinarily like everything sucks. I was pretty explicitly seeking prison or death. I just knew that I didn't want to be in the life that I was in anymore. And poor passerbys would try and ask me how my day was, and I would launch into these very depressing soliloquies about how awful the world was and how I could get a job because the pain's gone now, but I don't see the point because everything sucks and everyone is awful. And that went on for quite a while. I'm going to pause there because it seemed like you had a question before I dropped the big heavy thing there.
Yeah. I was just interested in the sudden change. Like, well, first of all, I mean, it's just the first week of you being homeless sounds amazing. Like, which is just not what I was expecting. And I was actually just wondering where you were living at the time. I mean, where did you find somewhere to sleep? Did it feel safe to sleep at night? I mean, you weren't sleeping for the first, 9 days or whatever it was, but like, what was your situation like?
So this was like mid-city LA. There's what was it? There's a park right next to the Grove Shopping Center. That was where I was hanging out in the beginning. There is a minor celebrity from a movie that's pretty famous who was hanging out there too. She was doing a lot of heroin and meth and getting abused by her girlfriend. Just as a side note, again, there are a number of people, everybody's got these crazy stories when they're using meth, and most of them aren't real. But I started looking them up, and there are a few people who kind of, I don't know, I like to think of it as like they achieved the American dream and they realized it wasn't enough. People who had done great things, been famous or whatever, and had just really crashed and burned. But
wow. So like famous people, like celebrities, were visiting, I guess, the camps.
No, they were homeless,
and they were homeless. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I knew. I mean, I never knew anybody that had been an A-lister, but I knew people that had been famous to some degree, just hanging out, doing crime, doing drugs. But yeah, no, I slept in corners of parks. I slept on sidewalks sometimes. I fell asleep I got worse and worse just psychologically throughout the next year or two. And there were times I like fell asleep in dumpsters because I'd just been using meth for too long and my body couldn't stay awake. And maybe I was like crouched over because it was cold. And then I wake up. There's one at dumpster outside a restaurant, and it was because it was a lot of food. It was pretty cozy, and it got cold, and I fell asleep, and I woke up. All of my stuff was stolen because I left it outside the dumpster. But I woke up in the morning, and I could hear voices outside. It was the employees, and they were just hanging out there. And I was like, oh God, I really don't want to be in this dumpster anymore. And if I pop my head up now, I mean, they had been out there for a while. They're going to know that I was just like sleeping in their dumpster. And I waited for so long, and then finally it got quiet, and I popped my head up, and there's somebody parked in a car right in front. Oh. I just ran off.
Oh my God.
But yeah, there were really interesting things right away. I didn't see cash for months. The street operates on a barter system, which was fascinating. People find or steal things and then trade them for drugs or other things. It was really interesting how kind of the street is sort of, and I use the street to mean the street culture. There are people who are homeless. Maybe they're living in their car, they're going to work. I don't think of that as being on the street. I think of, even people who are housed can be on the street if they are riding their bikes out and they're hanging out with homeless people all day or the gangs or whatever. I think that's kind of like what I think of as street culture. But just very antiquated in a lot of their views, just a lot of racism, a lot of sexism. And I felt like there were a lot of people there that probably were there because of shame. I had one friend who he doesn't think of himself as trans, so I don't want to call him trans, but I think there could be a world in which he might have been. He loved dressing as a woman, and he glowed when he did it. And he would only do it when he got really, really high and rode his bike down to turn tricks. But in those moments, it really seemed like that was, he just, something beautiful came out of him. And there were a lot of people like that where I felt like they felt shame over some part of themselves, some core part of themselves that they felt like society had rejected. And I feel like that's probably a bigger factor in what puts people out there than is like commonly known.
I know a guy who had a baby at this girl that he slept with had a baby at a really young age, and he ended up being, unfortunately, kind of a deadbeat dad. But I think, I knew him fairly well, and I think it was just so motivated by shame. I think shame, and I think with quite a few deadbeat dads that I've met throughout life, it just feels like there's this core of real shame there, and it just motivates them to run away.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's, I was just kind of digressing a little bit on some observations that I found interesting. And as part of that, it is very unsafe for women. The women that I knew, there weren't very many, and they disappeared a lot. Maybe they went to jail. Maybe they got out. Maybe they did die. There's kind of no way to know. And so, I was in a bad enough place that I was willing to seek protection. And it's much safer if you have a man. There are codes. Not everybody follows the codes, but one of the codes is you do not mess with a man's woman. So I started dating somebody who had actually previously been a fairly prominent porn star many, many years ago. He was one of the ones that had achieved something like what people think of as the American dream. And it had kind of like all collapsed under him. And he was a dumpster diver. So that's where I learned dumpster diving. There are actually tons of tips and tricks. You can get good at it. I was able to like differentiate between like 3 different trash smells by the end. Just from outside the dumpster, you just get used to it. There's like a smell that's like, it means that there are probably maggots in there, which means baby poop or meat. So stay away. There's another smell that's like food waste. And there's another smell that's just like, this is like fermenting water at the bottom, or fermenting whatever at the bottom of a trash can. And those ones are good. I could tell if a battery was full by the sound it made when it hit the bottom of a dumpster. Like you just pick up on things.
It's like a hunter-gatherer. It's literally like just using your senses to gather food. That's incredible.
Yeah, I thought of it a lot like a video game, because you have all of your stuff stolen regularly by other homeless people, or it's thrown away by cops. And so I over and over again would find myself with the clothes on my back. No phone, no ID, nothing else, and probably ill-fitting clothes to begin with. And so you start out, you grab whatever's there. It doesn't fit, it looks kind of gross. Maybe you grab some like used like convenience store crappy makeup, and then you find better stuff, and you can't keep it all. You don't have space for it, so you have to discard the old things, and you level up your gear. And every once in a while, you find like a legendary item. You find like a gold necklace or a laptop or like designer clothes or something. And I got pretty quick at like that turnaround of like, oh shit, all my stuff's gone. I gotta start over, and it started being kind of fun for me. And then I think the version of the real life version of looting the body is checking the pockets. That might have been wishful thinking more than anything else. I don't think I ever really found much in the pockets, but I knew some people who'd found cash in clothing pockets that was thrown away or discarded on the streets. You always loot the body.
Amazing. Good to know. That's incredible.
Yes.
You're making homelessness sound too much fun.
Oh yeah, one of the best hauls I had was I was riding my bike, and if you see, you know, I started to memorize kind of when the trash cans would be picked up in certain areas, and I knew kind of which areas were better for dumpstering. And there was one I knew the trash cans weren't coming out for another week, and there's a big pile of stuff, and so that means somebody's moving, and that's often stuff that is good. They just got too stressed out, or maybe they don't care about sustainability and they didn't donate. And I think I looked it all up on Poshmark. I think the resale value of the designer dresses I found there was something like $5,000 to $6,000, which is an incredible feeling when you're like, this was going to get thrown away. And that all got stolen pretty immediately. But one day I'm going to have enough free time to go to LA, and I'm going to do a YouTube series on dumpstering, and I'm going to go to all the spots.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah.
I'm already subscribed. Yes. I want to see it.
Yeah, it'd be super fun. Like maybe like furnish an apartment in a month or something. That might be ambitious, but it's possible.
Yeah. Just dumpster diving. Make a meal from a dumpster. Yeah. Like just everything. Like here's how to survive. That's fun. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I've noticed that homeless people, it seems like regular people don't kind of include them in a lot of ways. Like there's just this level of homeless people not being there. Like a lot of people kind of ignore them, no eye contact, kind of, it's almost like they're kind of removed from society. Like it feels to me like they're treated sometimes as not even human. And I wonder if you have an experience with that.
I mean, constantly. You get the police called on you for existing. I remember there was one alley that I was staying in with the porn star ex. We had a tent set up in an alley, and we had the cops called on us that first day 8 times. Had the cops roll up. We weren't doing anything. And I remember there was one day after another bad thing happened. I was looking for food. It was the 4th of July, and I was just trying to find food. And I think it was in West Hollywood, and a man came out, and he just looks at me, and he's like, "Oh, really? On the 4th of July?" And I was just like, I was barely holding it together. And yeah, there you get people yelling awful things. You get people trying to pick you up too, like clear predators. You get yeah. Some of the cops were nice though. There's an interesting camaraderie between cops and criminals in some ways, because you kind of understand each other's world a little bit. And if you're in the same area for a long time, you start to know each other's names. There was one night I was out with a couple of people, and I think at this point, we were all somewhat notorious for different reasons within the local police. And I was inside a dumpster, and these two men were outside talking, and they make a sound, and I pop up and I turn around, and there's like, I don't know, 7 cops with like assault weapons aimed at us. And then they were just like, "What's up, guys? We're just checking in." And they were completely just trolling us.
That's amazing. Oh my God.
Oh, wait. Do you want to hear another funny story?
Of course I do.
Okay. This is so this guy and I haven't picked out a good nickname for him. I really want to use his real name because it's hilarious. I mean, his street nickname, but I haven't decided if I should be that public about it yet. Because I do intend to write a book about all of this someday. But so I was with him. He was a sex addict. And when you use crystal meth, it's hard to finish. So there'd be some days where we'd be going most of the day. It was not particularly fun. But there was one garage that we'd been staying in, and this particular police officer told us to leave. And then there was one night where we had nowhere else to go. And so we go back in this, it was just a little standalone unit. We knew there was a mattress in there. So we went back there. And I think I had actually, I mean, crystal meth does crazy things to you when you're using it for that many days. I fell asleep mid activity. And I wake up and there's just a super bright flashlight. And of course we're butt naked because we were in the middle of the act. And I have to say, so the guy that was the head of the like homeless unit was there, was higher standing. And the one who'd originally told us to leave was there. We knew both of them. And you could tell they were trying not to laugh the entire time they were writing this ticket. And we were, of course, just mortified. So we go what felt like all the way across town. It was really like maybe a mile, but it felt like, okay, we're safe now. We're in a completely different world. And we set up a tent, and this cop rolls up before we're even done setting up. So we'd never seen this woman before in our lives. And she looks at us and she goes, "Oh, it's you guys. We heard you had a rough night." But it gets better because, I don't know, something like 6 or 8 months later, I am now associated with completely different people. That relationship is long over. I'm in a completely different arc and also in a different part of town. And I think this was right before a Trump visit to LA where, I think that's what it was, where he'd been complaining about the homelessness problem there. And so I think my impression was that we were some of the more notorious people on this little like strip of sidewalk that we had. And they came and threw away all of our stuff, and they're supposed to give you a warning if they're going to do that. So I think what they did was illegal, but they were making a big showing of like getting rid of the notorious people. And of course everybody fled, and I don't flee, I freeze. So I was the one sitting there talking to the cops as they threw away all of our, the worldly possessions of 3 or 4 people. And there's one there who is, I mean, he's a cop's cop, just like very sleek, very muscular, very serious looking. And, we're talking for like an hour or two, and I'm into the people pleasing, like fawning thing, like trying to make jokes. And like, I'm harmless. And at the very end, he mentions the name of that department head. And I was like, oh, funny story. He walked in on my ex and I at one point, and this man, this jaguar of a man, his face just drained of color. And then it turned bright red. And I kid you not, he squeaked, "Oh, I know who you are."
Reputation. Your reputation precedes you. What were you?
Oh, yeah. So,
what were you known for on the street?
I'm not entirely sure. I did try to reconnect with one of the police officers that I know when I got off the street, but I was still kind of insane, and I don't think I did a very good job. I am kind of curious, but I think it was mostly that I hung out with people who were committing fairly active crimes, and they mostly wouldn't tell me about it, and I just kind of like hung out and did silly things. Well, we're not going to go to that, but I was not breaking into cars on the regular or houses the way that I think some of the people that I associated with did.
Yep. Okay. And how long were you homeless for?
2.5 years, roughly.
Okay.
It was
Before
go ahead.
Go on. Well, I want to ask you actually what you think would solve this homeless crisis that we have. But I'm wondering if maybe you should, we should get to the part of the story where you get out of the homelessness, or maybe, I don't know, up to you. But I do want to hear your answer at some point.
Yeah, maybe put a pin in that. So there's a whole arc. I mean, tons of other things happened during that time, and then eventually I was at about, not as close, not the fullest, deepest rock bottom anyone could get in life, but it was pretty far down there. I was in a pretty rough shape. Dumpster diving one night. I was heavily pregnant, which is a thing I don't talk about that much because I still feel some shame about that. That's a whole other story. But so this guy came and he was dropping off DoorDash food, and he talked to me, and he was much younger than I was. He was very good looking, very well put together. And I used to joke, I was very into serial killers, quite concerningly into serial killers when I was in high school. And I used to joke that if I were Ted Bundy's type, back in the day, that I absolutely would have been dead, if I'd run across him, because
joke.
yeah.
There's just this population of women who love serial killers, and it's so common. It's so interesting.
Well, in his case particularly, I just like the having saying he lost his puppy or dropping things while he had a crutch, that would there's no way I would not help someone like that. So I would have fallen for that kind of thing very easily. It's not that I found him attractive. I'm just that would have worked on me.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Okay, yeah, makes sense.
I didn't have the that kind of anyway.
Yeah, not that. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Anyway, but in retrospect, I mean, it is funny that I used to say that because I think this guy probably could have nearly been that for me. He one thing that I think that was at the core of a lot of arguments with my mother growing up, we had a very strained relationship for most of my life, was I care a lot about values and what's going on the inside and things that aren't really super tangible to other people. And she cares a lot more about kind of external indicators of success and things like that. And that was really at the core of a lot of disagreements. And there was a point at which I remember having a pretty clear thought in this arc before I'd met him, where it was the sciatica was gone. I was healthy. I could have walked into someplace to get a job. And because I couldn't summon the desire to, I was okay, there's something wrong with my brain. And also I have made, clearly I've made bad choices. I am in the ultimate position of where you end up when you make the worst choices, but I could not for the life of me figure out exactly which ones it was, because I had, I really gained a lot from doing cocaine. I had reasons for doing a lot of the things that I did. And I couldn't really trace back any one thing where I'd gone wrong. And so I was willing to question all of them. I was willing to question every belief that I had, because they were all equally suspect. I was out of ideas. It was I kind of think it's probably pretty similar to the Buddhist place of surrender. And so that was a thing. When I met him, he was a deeply unpleasant person in a lot of ways. Even, it was immediately obvious. He was full of rage, and he was bigoted and mean, cruel. And he worked a lot of hours. He was an immigrant from Iran. He was here on a student visa. He spent all day at school, and then he worked all the time. And he just outwardly seemed to have his life together in all the ways that I did not. And so I thought, maybe that's the thing I've gotten wrong this whole time. Maybe I've been caring about the wrong things. I don't have anything else going on. I will try something with him. And that got pretty bad pretty fast. And I had a couple arcs with him. Debating how deep to go into this story, mostly just because I don't want to take up too much time. But we had a moment pretty early on. We were already starting to fight a lot, and just another aside, I learned through all this. I had never really read anything about domestic violence, domestic abuse. There's almost a handbook that they follow. When I did start reading about it, finally, he ticked all the boxes. And one of the things was really early on when we had this fight, I was like, what would I need to do to make this work? He said, well, you need to let me be the dictator. You need to do everything I tell you to do. And I've heard that from other people. That is a common thing that people like this start out with saying. But at the time I was just like, okay, I can do that. And there was another conversation early on where he told me about this crush that he'd had with this girl he'd barely spoken to. And he'd watch her sitting at another desk, and he finally told her how he felt. And she either didn't reply or was flippant about it. And he went out with his friends and was so crushed and they kept being like, it's, it was just a crush. You'll get over it. You'll be fine. And he was so depressed to be around that they ditched him. And I think he was 21 when this happened. He smoked 2 packs of cigarettes and woke up in the hospital. He'd had a heart attack, which should have been a red flag, or at least like an orange one. But at the time, I was like, oh my God, I had one of those really intense, mostly unrequited crushes in high school, and I got over it. Like this person, like I just went through all this horrible things on the street, and I need to process them eventually. But right now, I need to get my shit together, stop being immature, and be there for this person who needs me. And then I did. I stopped using very quickly. I got a couple jobs. I sort of forged myself into the person that I thought he needed me to be. I think a lot of why I have so much more kind of understanding for how people can end up married to people who wind up abusive now, because I think that it only escalated as quickly as it did, because he would be mean to me about something and then I suddenly wouldn't be that thing anymore, and it would happen so fast. And of course, he's not being mean to me for that reason. He's not yelling about how I'm homeless or a criminal or a drug addict because he actually cares about those things. It's because, it's control, it's cruelty, it's whatever. But because that change had happened so rapidly, where I was just like, I'm going to become sparkling and chipper and optimistic and like caring and all these things. And it was a matter of weeks, I think, where it was like really, really big changes. And then I didn't have anything going on. So I would think about every single fight that we had, and I would come up with something new I could try. And I would talk to him exhaustively about all of this. Like we had very, very in-depth communications about like every transgression, everything that was like not acceptable. And it really seemed like I would try to not lead him to conclusions. And it really seemed like he'd get it sometimes. And then there'd be a moment where he just wasn't there anymore. There was no one behind his eyes. And that's another thing that I've heard from other people, that kind of shift happening. And then everything would be gone. And
I think that's common with psychopaths. Yeah. A lot of people report that with psychopaths. Yeah. So just to recap, he got you out of homelessness?
Well, we were staying in his car. He said he had an apartment. I think he either didn't or he didn't want me there. I can't trust anything that he said. But it was like, I got off the street in that I got out of street culture. I was not, and that's another thing that they just figure out a way to do. He was like, you can't be associating with those people anymore because they are criminals. They're bad for you. And then I had no support network. I had no one I was talking to. And then when things started to get bad, I tried to reach out, and that did not go well when I tried to reconnect with people.
It's another trait of abusers is they isolate you from other people.
And it just, all of it kind of made sense. I was like, oh yeah, they are criminals. I shouldn't be taught. You're right. I'm trying to be healthier. And anyway, because I didn't know anything about domestic abuse, I didn't know how dangerous it is to tell someone you're leaving. I had developed a practice with the guy that I was with through all my 20s, where when I started to get activated, I would step out. I would go smoke a cigarette. I'd take a walk. I'd listen to music, and I would come back when I had calmed down enough to communicate what the hurt was that got me activated. And we rarely got into fights because we would communicate like adults about the things that hurt instead of, being mean to each other, arguing or trying to hurt each other. And this guy from the street, Parham was his name. He would not let me go for a walk. And I had no tools because I had not had to deal with anger in so long, because I had found a way to process my own anger. And he would chase me down the streets. He would do all sorts of things. And there came a point at which there was one fight where a switch flipped. I realized I don't know what else to try. I am out of things to try. And each time with the walks, I would tell him, I'm not leaving you. I'm just going for a walk. I'm not leaving you. And then this time I said, okay, no, I'm leaving you. And that led to I always think about this when I see people on the street and I ask if they need me to call the police, because someone right before all this happened, someone asked if I needed them to call the police. And I said no. And then I ended up in the car with him, and he like the sea was down. I think I kind of given up at one point. And I was just like, all right, just like when you let me go, you'll let me go. And he ended up over me with his hand over my mouth and kind of off and on for a few hours. The next day I had one of those like petique. How do you pronounce it? The it's a red bloody patch in your eye from burst vessels from strain. And I had like cut marks on the inside of my mouth. And that's kind of when I was like, oh, because I really didn't think he was gonna kill me. But I think I was so drained after that happening. I stayed in his car with him for a couple of days because I couldn't even go in the grocery store to get food. I couldn't move really. No energy. And I just sat on my phone and I read about domestic violence for like 2 days. And it was the thing that finally got me away from him was reading an article that said that people who are the victims of a blocked airway attack at the hands of an intimate partner are 700% more likely to end up dead than people who are victims of other kinds of violence because it can just be so quick. And that's when I realized like, I don't think he's going to kill me. Also, that's probably what all 700% of those people thought. And so I went off grid, hid out from him, had a few weeks of things being very, very hard. And I don't know exactly when it was that it happened, but there was a moment in time where I suddenly realized that if I could change myself as like seemingly fundamentally and as rapidly as I did for him, that I could do it for me. And then I started doing it. And that is the thing that led to me. I mean, from that moment, everything has felt okay. Like it's going to be okay. It is okay now. I have dips. I have like, okay, like things are getting a little hard. I'm going to go hide in my room for a while, but it never feels like a life sentence. And I picked up crystal meth again after that for a while, and it felt different from any other time I've used drugs in my life. All the other times I was like, I may not quit ever. And I picked it back up. I was like, I just got fucking traumatized. I'm going to use this because I don't have better coping skills. I'm going to use it until I don't need to anymore. And then that's what I did. And just everything about my life has just felt fundamentally different. And that was, it took me another like six or 8 months, I think, to get from that to back at my parents' house and not using drugs anymore. But from that moment on, like it just, everything has been like fairly rapidly improving, and getting better and better. And everything has felt different. I call it sometimes my happiness switch flipping. But that is when I started doing the like fun little games and quests and things in the trash. And I started taking care of myself better. And I just, it felt like I'd become a different person in a lot of ways.
Wow. Does it feel like when you did it for him, did it feel like a fawn response, or did it feel like you actually changed fundamentally?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally is a sticky word, right? I mean, like, I was on a trajectory to fixing a lot of things, in a certain way. And maybe fundamentally is not the right word to use, because I just would have crashed again at some point because I was still doing it for the wrong reasons. But I did learn, I mean, I learned a lot of things. Then one of the things, he was meaner to me when he didn't eat, and he didn't eat a lot. And he would always be he would always be trying to get me to eat. And so I would tell him, I'm only going to eat if you're going to eat. And so I would get him to eat more. And then I realized, oh shit, I'm also nicer. And like things are easier when I eat. And so I think that was the beginning of me, like getting out of like a lifetime's worth of like accidental anorexia, because I just wasn't eating enough.
Wow.
But it was,
it's amazing.
Yeah. So there were a lot of changes even in just like the way that I moved through the world during that time. But I don't think that I think they would have been as short-lived as when I had those periods in college of like, everything's great. Everything's kind of magical. Everything feels amazing. It would have gone away again. And the change that happened when I started doing it for me meant that this is my baseline now.
Yeah. When you quit drugs for him, did you get the withdrawals?
You don't get the same kind of withdrawals from crystal meth. You get, yeah. And that's another weird thing that happened. I kind of wish that I had I have an Aura ring now. I kind of wish I'd had Aura data and like all sorts of other data from right when I got off the street. It would have been really interesting. But I remember seeing some charts, and maybe they aren't very accurate, but I remember seeing some charts and some court mandated drug program I was doing about how, when you use these kind of drugs for many years, they, this is what happens to the dopamine part of your brain. And it takes years to find happiness again. And I was just great. And my mom kept being like, you're kind of like in a manic episode. And I was pretty manic. I was a little insane, but like, as far as like my mood and excitement and like, just like zest for life, like that was just instantly, like, I didn't have a period of like, I have to rebuild my feelings for like my ability to grasp happiness. And I don't think that's usual. And I think probably there's some like neuroplasticity thing that happened with like rewiring my brain a little bit through all this, but I don't actually know.
But did you have any, like, after you quit, did you want to use crystal meth again? It sounds like you didn't have a strong, okay, wow.
I did.
Everyone's brain is different. I guess interesting. Do you think you're fundamentally different than a lot of crystal meth users, or do you think it was just the way you altered your mindset?
That is so hard to answer.
Do you think it's something you could teach?
Right. No, and this,
because if you could teach this in a course, you would save millions of lives.
And this gets to the question of like, what policies do we enact? How do we fix homelessness? What do we say to homeless people? That kind of thing. Which is, I don't know. It's really hard. I grew up feeling like I was completely average, and therefore any insights I had about my brain were universal because I was just like everyone else. I no longer think that's the case.
You should have realized it, donkey ears. And by the way, somebody needs to buy Brooke some donkey ears for the next Vibecamp. I don't. This needs to happen.
Yeah, apparently I wanted to be donkey because I wanted to kick people. I don't know where that was coming from, but
great, awesome.
Yeah.
Some moves, maybe. Yeah.
So a couple of the hard things. I mean, I do have like, when I was a child, I think my mom told me my IQ was like 136. I don't remember that. I haven't taken an IQ test in a long time, but I think that's like relatively high. I've done a lot of drugs since then, which probably impacted it. So I had a lot of privilege. Like my mom started me out reading very young. I was like fairly intelligent. I took AP classes, all those things. I was heavy reader. And then I did all of that really intensive inner work. I mean, it's like during that cocaine period, I was working at this deli, and I would use that as my lab. And I would test out the theories that I had about how to be human with other humans there. And I like worked through a lot of things that I was just like really, really actively doing a lot of introspection, a lot of work on myself. And without that, I mean, all of those privileges, and I still barely made it out by the skin of my teeth. So it is really hard. There are a lot of people who, I think there are a lot of people on the street who are like me, who are like quite sharp and just lost. And there are a lot of people who are very low IQ, who grew up in extreme poverty, who never had any of the privileges that I had. And so it is hard for me to say what can be done. And I used until I didn't need to anymore. There was each of these drugs was like addressing some kind of need or some, heroin. I think that I'm like a pretty sensitive person. I feel things very strongly. I also have like sensory sensitivities that I only really became aware of really recently. I also had like insanely extreme anxiety that I had no idea was going on. I was just completely dissociated. So I think heroin dulled a lot of that stuff and made it like I didn't really like use with other people. My friends didn't use. I was going to work. I kept jobs. It just helped me feel like I could function. And I think, yeah, it's just so hard because there's so many different threads. Like I don't even like there. There was that abusive relationship that I think was the trigger, but like you can't separate out like the years of doing cocaine. You can't separate out like all these other things that contributed. But I really, it's yeah. I think I sort of like drove my train off a cliff there, but
it's very multifactorial. It's not that easy, but maybe older Brooke will go into politics and fix homelessness.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much in the camp of like drugs are a symptom, and I think that I think there's also like there could be lessons there for people who overeat or who play video games too much or any kind of like compulsive behavior that's detracting from our quality of life. I think all those kind of stem from a similar sort of like something hasn't quite clicked right in our brains. Go ahead.
I've heard Dr. Drew say, he's like an addiction medicine doctor. I've heard him say, and I thought this was really interesting, that a hardcore meth user is to be compared to an Alzheimer's patient in the sense that you see them wandering around the street. They don't have full control of themselves. You don't say, well, let's let this Alzheimer's patient have freedom and go walk in the middle of the road because that's their God-given right. You say, no, they need to be put at a home because they can't control themselves. And he says, you see a meth addict, not one who's got a job and, you know, taking care of their family and stuff, but you see a meth addict who's doing the chicken dance in the middle of the road. You need to put them in a facility for multiple weeks, let them get clean, and then let them make their decisions after that. And that requires involuntary psychiatric care, but they are not in control of themselves enough to consent to not having involuntary psychiatric care. And I wonder what you think of that.
Yeah, I don't know. I believed, and I was estranged from my family during most of this time. They would have put me in rehab, and or brought me back to my hometown, which was Reading, which is, you know, if I was miserable in Reading growing up, if I was very close to suicidal in LA, I would have killed myself going to Reading. I don't know what like a rehab center, like an actual like live-in inpatient thing would have done for me. Maybe it would have worked. I never tried it. I did like the court order programs. I just kept using through them. I feel like I am so stubborn. And so, I mean, I had to learn everything the hardest possible way. So I have, you know, and some people like, well, you know, I figured out a life that works really well for me, but like, you know, I didn't do all those crazy things you did, Brooke. And I'm like, I respect you way more for that, because if I had been smarter than I was, I would have actually learned from other people's examples instead of like having to do it all myself. But I didn't go through what you did, but I definitely had a period in my life where I felt as if it was like my divine path to go into the darkness. Mm. And I wonder if that was, if somehow the darkness was also calling to you and you just needed to experience that full spectrum of human emotion. Maybe. I think I was definitely playing fast and loose with my own life. I don't think that I had any sense of like, I am immortal. Although I got a little close to that kind of like delusions, with one particular friend in college, but, I was definitely doing volumes of drugs that could have killed me at various points. And that was somewhat intentional, just like that like risk-seeking behavior. But when it started to get to the point where I was like, you know, the few years before and then during homelessness, I wasn't being called anywhere. I just had given up. Yeah. And one more thing, until we go towards your incredibly successful future, well, past now, but future then. I want to talk about, all time is the same. We're all in one moment. I want to ask you, so in AA, they say that you need to find God in order to, and just totally accept God and kind of give up on this idea that you can like white knuckle it. And that doesn't sound like your path, but I'm wondering if you had any experiences of finding your version of God, a higher power. I don't think in any way that is normally used. I also did not white knuckle it. I get people reaching out to me every once in a while with like, hey, like I'm struggling with this, or my relative, my loved one is struggling with this. Like, what advice do you have? And I mean, I used until I didn't need it anymore. And that only worked for me because I had spent so much time trying to like understand myself. A lot of people, that leads to death. So I don't know quite what to say, but when I stopped using heroin, someone tried to give me some 8 days later, as probably a tactic to get me dependent on him. 8 days after I quit fentanyl, and this is 2017, it would have been. And I just had no desire. They gave me fentanyl for a heart procedure that I had long COVID right after all of this. They just said they had no other options, and I did not like it. I don't think it helped with the pain at all of the procedure, and it made me really emotionally volatile. I just like started sobbing afterwards, and I feel like I'm like, I feel things strongly, but I bounce back quickly. I don't tend to, like, I'm fairly emotionally stable given all of that now. And I just didn't even like the way it felt. And it kind of made me realize, I think heroin was never really for physical pain. It was addressing, like a deep emotional pain. And I think that's the case for a lot of people, probably. Like the ones that get hooked on it probably have some big core emotional wound that they are covering up with that. But yeah, I did not white knuckle it. Yeah.
I used the wrong terminology. I'm sorry. I meant to say you got off of it without, like, I guess an external structure, like AA or something like that. And I just said white knuckle, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. So yeah, white knuckle had given me the feeling of like, oh, I'm gonna like brute force this, like discipline. It was not discipline at all. Each time I have stopped using a hard thing, it is because I was done. And that's why, like, the I don't care what terminology people use, but I think it's pretty common within AA and other programs to say you are always just in recovery. And that doesn't really resonate with me, because I think I just feel done. And one of the really cool things that happened when I got off the street, whenever I would try to quit heroin, I would have using dreams. And that made it so hard to stay off, because I would just, the feeling of it and everything. When I got off the street, I started having dreams where my friends from the street, like, I was trying to go off on some quest. There'd be like magic involved and aliens, and they're over there using. I'm like, guys, you're slowing me down. Like, knock it off. And then I just like ditch them and run off to the quest. And it was like a really satisfying indication that like I wasn't just telling myself stories, that like my subconscious was just done. It was really interesting.
Oh, cool. That's amazing. And so now, you said before that things just kept getting better and better. So tell us about that.
Yeah. Everything's just been amazing. So I had a second arc with Parham, for a lot of reasons. I'm not gonna, we're done with that. Anyway, I finally called my dad. Things got bad enough. I called my dad, and I was just like, these are all the things that happened. I need you to come rescue me. And he came. I had a cat by then. The cat is the real reason I got off the street, because I still had a lot of like kind of like anger and pride stopping me from like doing what I needed to do to fix my relationship with my parents. And it was like, oh, this animal, this was ASPCA that I called. They have a program where they will take in pets, victims of domestic violence while you find shelter. And they took him in, and then I couldn't find shelter. I just kept being like, they'd be like, are you in danger right now? And I'd be like, well, not this second. I mean, he's actively tracking, like taking over my Google account to try to stalk me and come get me. But like, not this second. He's not here right now. And they like, I just could not communicate like how bad my situation was. And after about a week of that, I was just like, I abandoned my cat in the shelter, and I have no other choice. I have to call my parents. So I did. And my dad came a day or two later, picked me up. I had a backpack and a cat. I'd lost access to the Google account because of the ex. And so I had no digital footprint. I had no real possessions. No friends, nothing. I was complete blank slate. And like it was great. I wish I had the photos now to look back on. But I had the opportunity to just construct myself into the person that I wanted to be. And I started out with basics. I was self-isolating, before it got cool. I really spent a lot of time experimenting with sleep. I had extreme insomnia, even compared to the other meth users, because I'd been using heroin for so long. It took me longer to fall asleep. I slept more lightly, and I woke up sooner. And I have friends who've been off of opiates for years, and they still have terrible insomnia. It took me, I think 2 months is probably longer than it took. I just was, every single day I tried something new, and I figured out, like, I had to not take a nap. I had to not drink caffeine past like noon. I had to exercise a lot, and I think there were like maybe one or two other things. And if I missed any one of those, I could not sleep. I didn't get up right away when I woke up. I couldn't stay in bed. And after a while of like, once I found those, and if I did them with enough discipline, then my sleep is great now. It's better than some people I know who've never done drugs. And there were enough things like that. Like, I accidentally got rid of like a lifetime's worth of a sweet tooth. I used to joke that I was like Elliott Smith, because I was living off of ice cream and heroin for weeks at a time. And I can't eat more than like a bite now, because I was like, well, my problem wasn't that my intuitions were wrong. My problem was I wasn't trusting them enough. And so I went on this whole kick where I was like, I'm going to listen, like figure out exactly what my body wants to eat. I would imagine eating all these, like a range of different types of foods, and whatever I salivated at, I would eat that. And it was never sweets. Sweets was always like the first thought. And then long enough of not eating sweets. And now it's just too sweet for me now. I almost never want sweets. And it's just like all these fascinating things. And it was so exciting. And I was like each time I like leveled up in something, then I'd like pick something new to level up in. And I started writing a bunch, and I started trying to reconnect with old friends. And one friend mentioned Discord. So I started a Discord server, and I was like trying to like tell everyone about all these things. And I know I was reading it. So then I started a blog. I really wanted to find people I could talk to about these things. And I was sharing my blog on Facebook, which I had made a new account, and it was all just kind of people I'd known from college or high school, and they just weren't really getting it. And I was like, there are going to be people out there in the world who like see the world similarly to me, and I just got to keep broadcasting, and I will find them eventually. And there's somebody on Twitter, Goblin Oz, I had known briefly. They had dated somebody that I was good friends with, and Gobs was like, you should join Twitter. And I kept being like, it sounds good for you, but like, it's not for me. And then they posted one of my blog posts, and the views count was so high. I was like, oh, if I want people to read this blog, I have to join Twitter.
Good job, Gobs. Yeah. All right. I love it.
And I get there, and I was just like, oh, these are the people that I've been looking for. These are the oddballs who like see the world kind of similar to me. And I eventually stopped writing the blog. I was just like, I just want to make friends with these people. And I started like hanging out with people more and more. And then eventually I was like, this is inefficient. Just like traveling to a city and seeing 15 of you. You guys should all just come to me. I mean, there's other versions of this story, but that's sort of the inception of Vibecamp. It was 1 year after I joined Twitter that we started planning out Vibecamp. And wait, was it? Yeah, I think so. And then it was a year later that it took place. And the first one was, I think, over 400 people for 3 days. And it kind of hit a cultural chord. It became a meme.
Oh my God, it did. It was huge. Like, it was just, I mean, we talked about it from Australia. Like, it was just a massive thing. And it was only 400 people, but like, it affected so many more people than that.
Yeah. And I'd never really been a festival person. I'd never run events. I just, I think one of many privileges that I have now, and part of why it doesn't make sense for people to be like, oh no, I'm so sorry when they hear about my story, is because that is the boogeyman, right? Like, that's what everybody's afraid of. They're afraid of taking too many risks because they will end up alone and on the street. And I'm just like, been there.
What more adventures? Don't threaten me with a good time.
But even more than that, the things that I learned coming out of it, like I will never be in that position again, because I have overcome like this sort of toxic independence and this like inability to like try act like, I wasn't doing the things that were healthy. I wasn't making good choices. I wasn't putting work into my relationships and sustaining them. Now I have just the most amazing social network anybody could ask for. That will never happen to me again. So the risk of like, oh, everyone knows I made a mistake and put on an event that people didn't like this is not a risk. So that's, yeah.
And Vibecamp is just, it's, how many people were at the latest one?
This one was, I think, also around 400. Our second year, because of the hype bubble, we had around 700. And then this year we did one for the eclipse in Texas first. And I think we started ticket sales really late because we are planning for the future. We want this to be around for a long time. So Brundoff from Twitter has been building us a new sort of like platform to handle ticketing and scheduling and all those things. And it wasn't ready in time to start ticket sales very early. So there are a lot of reasons why this year didn't see the numbers, but it went really well. And it was the first year. I mean, the first one went well. And then we were like, the next one can't be a disaster, because if the next one's a disaster, people will think the first one is a fluke. And after this Vibecamp 3 in June, was the first time where I came out of it just like, it's going to be fine. We could have a bad year now, and people will be like, they just had a bad year. And the entire tenor of the conversations of the org team and the attendees was different after Vibecamp 2, because it was so big. We were just like, oh, how do we fix all these big problems that happen? And this time, like, I feel like we've handled most of the big problems, and now we're thinking about how can we make this even cooler, which is just an incredible place to be.
So for people who haven't heard of Vibecamp, can you give us an explanation of what it is, what makes it so special?
Oh, that is the eternal question. I would send people, Rob Hardy from Twitter wrote a manifesto for us, which I quite like. He calls it the memes we live by. It's on our homepage, vibe.camp. And it's so the scene on Twitter, it kind of has its roots in rationality, post-rationality, and Visa Viracami. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I interviewed him.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
Visa, I think, and the rationalist blogs really played. They created this like fertile ground that turned. I mean, it is this etiquette, these norms of like, debate, disagree with people, don't devolve into like ad hominem attacks and things like that. Like treat people as humans, even if you disagree with them. Stuff from visas, yes anding, good reply game. All these things kind of transfer into the real world when you have people who've been steeped in that for long enough. And that's kind of what I think. Sometimes people bring me on to projects because they think that I can just build a community out of nothing. And that's not at all what I did. I took people from like an existing substrate and gave them a container to do things in. And I think there is something really powerful about these norms and this type of etiquette that I think is one of a very small number of like actually pluralistic spaces. Less so now because we had a lot of people like far right and a few far left people at our first events, but I think as Vibecamp is sort of finding its voice, people are self-selecting out, and I think both the far right and the far left hates us now. Far left hates us because
good. That's perfect. Fantastic.
Right. I don't think you could be I think that's the best position you could be in this world at the moment. And it's kind of like a safe haven for people who just don't want to do those things, who don't want to do the culture war thing, who just want to go find the other people who are like curious about the world and want to learn and just be wholesome together.
Yeah. Amazing. And so I went to Collie Camp this year, which is the Australian Vibecamp, and it was fantastic, hosted by Cauliflower Human. And I mean, what struck, I think the best way I could describe it is like definitely rationalists. And if you're not sure who rationalists are, intelligent autists, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it better, but really like, I think we're kind of in the post-rat spaces, which is where it's like, instead of trying to apply Bayesian logic to every single idea, there's just this group of people who did that and then realized that emotions were really important, and you could meditate and you could use different psychotechnologies and kind of change your mental state, and friendship was important. And so you have this group of incredibly intelligent people who are now like doing the inner work, and they're all at a giant camp together. And it's amazing. Like you probably have people starting businesses and then like talking for 2 hours and then doing a meditation workshop. It's an incredible space. And so if you're like, by the way, if you, dear listener, are feeling lonely, if you feel like you can't have the sort of conversations you want in the depth that you want with your friendship group, go find your local Vibe Camp. There's Jess Camp. There's one in like Turkey. I mean, they're everywhere nowadays. So wherever you are, you can find a Vibe Camp. Go meet your tribe.
Yeah. And that was one of my big motivating factors in it. It's like, I think that period of time in college, when I had that friend group that I would talk about things with, that I kind of needed to be the driving force to make that happen. And when I moved to LA, I just didn't, for whatever reason, I just didn't make that happen. And I never found it accidentally. And I think if I had like this Twitter scene existed, if I'd found it then, I think my life could have gone very differently. Cause I think that's really what I was seeking at the time. And so I think I want to find the other people. Like, I don't want to remain a Twitter event forever, although our roots will always, Twitter will always be fairly central. And ideally we get people to come post, because I think there's something extra magical about both the sense making that happens on Twitter after the events, and then also being able to like sustain these relationships over time in between the events. But I really want to just find the others, find the people who are seeking in that way, and have a space for them.
Now I've heard rumor of a more permanent Vibe Camp. Like maybe people are kind of trying to live close to each other and build like long-term communities. Can you speak to that at all?
I mean, it's been something that has been brought up. It's something I've thought about a number of times. I think it would be cool. One thing that I try to keep as a practice in my life currently is like wait until things feel easy. Because if it doesn't feel easy, it's probably not ready yet. And that's one of those ideas that's been in the water for long enough. I think probably something like it will happen eventually. I think the way that it's manifesting right now are with these hubs. New York has a big hub. SF has a hub. Sounds like maybe Sydney is starting to have a hub.
My husband, Elliot, is the center of the hub.
Amazing.
He does all the social things. He's great. Yeah. We have parties at our house. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So I think that, more and more people are kind of like talking about how they've developed scenes, how they've contributed to scenes developing in their local areas. And like, so I think more cities will probably, Nobu did that in Indonesia. People have done it in a few other places where I'm just like, I'm going to bootstrap a scene. I'm going to find the others who are just hanging out in this town and they don't realize we're all here. And I think that's more of that's going to happen. I think more people are going to travel to the existing hubs. And in those existing hubs, you have things like Fractal, you have like the neighborhood. You have these sort of like, what is the word I'm trying to think of? The center of gravity, whatever it is, people coming and living together in these big cities. And I think that's probably where it's going to be at for quite a while. Maybe it will turn into something more. If it does turn into something more, I could see it being something like a pop-up city model. There was Suzalu in Montenegro was the first one. It was a 2-month-long pop-up city focused on like cutting-edge tech, where they had like, it's like a 2-month-long conference kind of. Each week was a different topic, like biotech and ZK proof and thing like that. But that has turned into like a very vibrant scene globally. All these digital nomads are just going from one to another, like hanging out for a month here, 2 months there. And there's one called Vitalia that is partnering with Prospera, which is a startup city off the coast of Honduras on the island called Roatan. And these startup cities kind of famously have trouble drawing in residents. So it's kind of a perfect symbiotic relationship for them to work with the pop-up cities. Vitalia now has its own kind of hub in Prospera. It was a 2-month late thing. Now they're a permanent thing. They're working on setting up hubs other places. So I could see something where if we have more new cities being built, then, these people doing these 2-month-long events, and maybe Vibecamp will do one someday. And then maybe some people will stay. You have a small group of people, most people come for a couple months, and then a small group of people maybe stay year round, and maybe you have more and more. I could see a path like that, but I'm not I don't feel certain that that's how things are going to work out.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's so many new cities who just want to attract incredibly intelligent startup hackers.
Yep.
Like, that's great. Fantastic. And what projects are you working on now?
Currently, biggest one is TNS Camp, Network Society Camp. There was a point, so Balaji Srinivasan came out with this book. I'll just give some context because maybe not everybody listening to this knows what it is. He wrote a book called The Network State in maybe 2022, 2023. I'm not sure what year it was, but some months before that, I had kind of looked around. I think this is maybe even before Fractal. I was like, whoa, they're kind of like these hubs forming, and people are kind of like, starting businesses together and exchanging people. And when I read the network state, I was like, oh, this sounds similar. So the network state is sort of the one-liner I use. I don't know that this is one that other people would use, because I'm like, geographically distributed internet first or digital first nation states of the future. And looking through Balaji's like list of the kind of like the key points that need to be hit in order for something to qualify as a network state, kind of Teapot hits a lot of them, except it's decentralized. And Balaji's vision of this thing is supposed to be just that one strong leader and like a clear vision everyone's rallying behind. So it's really interesting that like, we don't have, no one's cares about sovereignty. There's no one clear leader. It's super decentralized, but it's global. It's vibrant. It's doing a lot of these things. So I got involved in the network state space a while back, and it's speaking at the conference in Amsterdam, and it's very nascent. There are a lot of people kind of thinking about new ways to do societies. There's some of them are dividing along political lines. There's kind of like network states, kind of like Bitcoin / right. And like you've got the network nations / Suzalu / ETH people that are kind of more left coded, and they don't get along very well. It kind of lives all these little pockets. And I think in order, one thing, Zach, who's working with me on the Network Society Camp, the other people are John Hillis from Cabin and Grin from Vibecamp at Cabin. Zach kind of talked to me one time about how like relationships are predicated on or movements are predicated on relationships. Kind of talked about like the history of some of like the civil rights movement in the US, and like a lot of these people like knew each other and they had like spent time together, and it's kind of like harder to accomplish big things in the world without a strong network. And so our idea is to take people to this children's summer camp that Vibecamp has used, that Dow Camp has used, and that works really well for Vibecamp to bring together kind of people who were political enemies. And it's hard to it's hard to dehumanize somebody when you're like first thing in the morning and you're half awake and you're getting coffee and you're eating pancakes. So that's one of our reasons. Get people to have fun together, get people to connect one-on-one. It's not like conferences are one-to-many. You could learn a lot of information, but like it's these relationships that we really care about. So that's going to be October 11th to 14th, just outside of Austin at a children's summer camp. And the website is just tns.camp.
So I'm struggling to understand like the cultural differentiation here between something like Vibecamp and something like TNS Camp. I mean, is TNS sounds like it's very crypto motivated, or like there's a strong crypto underpinning of it, but can you explain more about that?
There is a strong crypto underpinning, much more so than Vibecamp. There are a few crypto people in Vibecamp. I am sort of
Not anymore.
Wait, what?
Not anymore. Maybe early 2020.
AI. It's all AI now.
Yeah.
No, so there's a strong crypto contingent. It kind of has its roots in crypto. I'm not a Web3 person. I'm just friends with a lot of them. But it's a similar type of person in that they're very smart and also very weird. Going through these applications, it'll be people who like have crazy experience in very like legible ways, and then also they're like into ancient mysticism and will talk to you for like 4 hours about the Torah or something. Like it's still like delightful oddballs, and people like, I can teach flamenco dancing and I want to talk about like governance and like the six whatever, you know. It's a you know, it's a different flavor of weirdo, but it's definitely still like my type of weirdo. And this one's going to be much more top down. There's still going to be space for unconference style activities. But we really we've got some like world-class facilitators who are going to be guiding some of the workshops and things like that. And we want it to be an opportunity for people like it's going to be more focused. But yeah, I've been kind of like doing a rallying cry with teapot people. So we have some world-class facilitators. We really, it's going to be more top down. We really want to kind of create a container where people can both do real work together, have fun together, and also, you build these real deep connections in a more guided, structured way. I am trying to bring in some teapot people. Yeah, go ahead.
Nice. Can you let us know who the facilitators will be?
Yeah, so Zach is going to be one of them. David Ehrlichman is another one. He's with the HATS protocol. Both of them have done extensive work with like running events and running events within events. I guess.
Sorry, who is Zach?
Zach Anderson with Coordinate. I apologize. Zaku, Fifth World Zach on Twitter.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's a great team. I'm feeling pretty excited about where it's going. And I'm probably going to go to Austin a couple weeks earlier and just buy a bunch of weird things from antique stores, like leg lamps and plants and things, because we have an actual budget and I'm not used to being able to decorate, so that'll be fun.
Oh, fancy. Yeah. Very cool. And so okay, what do you know what they'll be teaching in their facilitation?
So there's going to be we're meeting next week to, I think, redo some of the schedule. There are some just like connection workshops that are going to be happening, and then there's also going to be some things like storytelling, like get to know each other, that kind of thing. And then we're also going to be doing like working groups where we like break down taxonomies, because right now in the space, I mean, there are network states, there's network nations, network societies, startup cities, charter cities, network cities. It's just there's a ton of terms being thrown around. A lot of people are kind of using them differently. And, it's interesting to sit down and like kind of break down what different people mean by different things. So there's going to be.
Oh, that's so helpful. Absolutely. I think one of the biggest problems with a lot of political movements or whatever is like, and I'm not even trying to get political. It's just like, I can just see how they're ineffective. For instance, the one that comes to mind is like a bunch of people protesting, for instance, like, okay, I'll say Occupy Wall Street, because that's not super triggering for people. Occupy Wall Street was just a bunch of people who were angry at a bunch of different things. And there was no like clear idea of what everyone wanted. Like if everyone had gathered together, okay, like environmental things, if everyone gathered together in their local community and was like, we want 5,000 more solar panels by the end of 2035 on roofs. Like we want to make it mandatory that you put solar panels on every new development. That would probably happen, right? And transferring over to this idea, it's like if you have all these different ideas with slightly different ideas and slightly different objectives that everyone has and no clear understanding of what definitions are, you don't get what you want. But if you can define everything and then have people go, okay, well, this is like this group is almost doing what I want. And if I move in and help them, I can probably achieve 95% of what I want. So I'm just going to be part of this group. Like, then you can actually achieve things. You can push forward en masse instead of everyone diverting into all these different directions and wasting energy. So I love that. That's fantastic. And it's so rationalist too. They know exactly how to structure their thoughts and put people together. And one of the things I loved about Socially Camp was that there was this, everyone held workshops. Like there was no structure at all. You went in the first day, people wrote on a whiteboard what they were going to be doing and they allocated themselves times. Like I did a mewing workshop. I don't know if you know what mewing is, but like, okay. So, mewing is the basic principles are if you, especially when you're younger, so under 25, but it does work over 25. If you keep your tongue resting on the roof of your mouth at all times, except when you're talking, and you chew hard food, and you nose breathe, don't mouth breathe, your face will look better and be more functional. And so like, you know how braces slowly use pressure to change the shape of your teeth? Well, your tongue also does that. Over time, it pushes your jaw forward. So, and chewing makes your jaw wider and stronger and better. So you see a lot of people with like, you don't have it, but like recession. So like the jaw is back here and then they have like an overbite here and it's unattractive. Well, it's unattractive because it's not evolutionary functional. Like if you always eat hard food and you eat like, for instance, an apple and your teeth connect all the time, especially if you have kids, by the way, at home, you have to feed them apples, like feed them carrots, things, make their teeth connect here and they will be more attractive and breathe better for the rest of their life. Like if you breathe through your mouth and you're always, like slack jawed, your face grows longer. And yeah, it's just breathing through your mouth is horrible for you in a bunch of different ways. So anyway, I did like this, I don't know, hour-long presentation on mewing and like 35 people showed up or something. It was fantastic. It was like the best. Yeah, it was really great. But yeah, I mean, people did workshops on charisma for the uncharismatic. They did circling, like, and by the way, if you're a bit autistic, if you're not that good with people, like please come to TNS Camp or Vibecamp or, whichever one like suits you, because there are so many people who just have like, are a little bit off in social skills and all these workshops are built around helping you connect with other people in sometimes ways that you've never connected before. It's amazing. It's absolutely fantastic.
Well, speaking of which, I'm going to do finally an event in the Bay Area soon. And it's actually mostly my team working on this. I'm sort of doing high-level consultation because I'm really focused on Network Society Camp. We haven't picked out a date yet. It's probably going to be towards the end of October. We should know very soon. We're going to be hopefully launching this soonish. We want to do Ms. Bowman's School for the Socially Inept. And this one we're going to be working a lot more closely with workshop hosts, things like that. It's not going to be the unconference style thing we've done with Vibecamp. This is going to be targeted. It's going to be people in the scene who are like, we're talking to Taco Bell. We're talking to like Wendell Britt. We're talking to Vivek. These people who have done things at Vibecamp that are sort of similar. Anything from like how to feel your feelings or like how to banter, how to be charismatic, how to flirt with women, how to read body language. A lot of, just anything that's sort of in that like bucket of things, which I mean I can use. There's so many things that I still need help with, even though I'm probably like upper percentile within the scene in terms of social skills. But I'm really excited. So that's going to be coming soon.
Oh, dude, I want to do that. That sounds amazing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I will. You have to give me details after this. This sounds fantastic. Cool. All right. Yeah. Body language is so important. I read this book called What Everybody is Thinking, What Every Body is Thinking at some point, like when I was 20, and it changed my life. It was amazing. Like just this little tip that I got that I use all the time. When you're at a party and somebody's feet are very important. When somebody's feet are pointing towards you, both feet are pointing towards you, it means they're interested. But as soon as you'll see someone point one foot towards the door, and that means they want to leave. And it's not about you. Like sometimes they need to go to the bathroom or whatever. But when their foot points towards the door, I usually say, oh, hey, like, how are you doing for time? Or I excuse myself to get a drink. And sometimes they're like, yeah, I just have this meeting that I have to get to, but this conversation's so interesting, but I need to go, but it's just like little things are so helpful. I think the biggest thing with body language though, is that you have to remind yourself to pay attention, because you can know all the facts, but if you're not watching all the time, if you're not like consciously taking it in, it's not really useful. So yeah, I wonder how they would address that, because it certainly seems to be the most vital. But anyway, I'm very excited. So maybe I'll have to come up from Sydney. I don't know. Okay. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. Amazing. You're doing so much. That's incredible. You're hosting these like really large scale events. I mean, yeah, you're hosting these like large scale events at various times, and it's not like a ton of them, but each one is making a huge impact.
It's funny because all along with Vibecamp, I've been telling people like, I never wanted to be an event planner. This has been a fun side quest. What I wanted to do when I joined Twitter is like, I'm going to talk about recovering from addiction. I'm going to talk about finding happiness. I'm going to talk about like all these, major like things that I figured out and see if they're useful for somebody. And then I just got super distracted by shiny objects for years. But I'm very excited. Matthias in Space is a great homie. He's one of our volunteers for Vibecamp. going to start contributing a lot more. He's helping out kind of with internal things now. His partner, one of his partners, runs, she's got a speech coaching thing. So I'm doing a course. It's the inspiredspeaker.com. I have been noticing every once in a while, I'm supposed to be looking at the lens. We haven't done too much in video work yet, but I'm on like week 10, and it's a year-long course, and it's been phenomenal. I'm getting comments from people finally already about like noticing changes in my voice and in my presence when I lead a group. So my plan right now is like get through this like next few months of events and then really step back. And I want to start telling my story more publicly. So that's going to be 2025. I hope to be maybe on more podcasts, hopefully on some stages, and maybe write a book is the plan.
Amazing. I would love to. I'm pre-ordering your book, whatever it is. Like I'm in. Let me know where to send the money. I'll buy it ahead of time. I would love to see you. By the way, I would love to see you on, first of all, Dr. Drew's. He has this little podcast, but he's so interesting when he talks to like recovering addicts and stuff like that. And I would love to hear you talk to Gabor Mate as well. Oh, you don't know? Okay, Gabor Mate. It's so interesting because you have very parallel thinking to him. He's a doctor who talks a lot about trauma and addiction. So one of his biggest things is like people who have a traumatic experience. I'm trying to get this right. They recover from the traumatic experience if they have a really good support network of people they can, and okay, there's a lot, but like a really good support network, he says. So like he asked people like, when you were a kid, did you have trauma? And they might say, oh yeah, like I was bullied a lot. And he goes, well, did you have a support network? And they say yes. And then he goes, well, okay. Could you talk to that support network? Let's say they were your parents. Could you talk to them about what was happening in school? And they'll say, well, no. And then he'll go, well, that's not really a good support network. Like they loved you, they took care of you in these ways, but you actually couldn't talk about what was going on for you. And that's very sad and that's very isolating. So, and then he is a big believer in this like mind-body connection. So he thinks a lot of diseases are caused by trauma and trauma, and then not having the support to heal the trauma. And I'm not sure if I'm along with him for the entire ride, but I think some of the things he says are very interesting. And he talks a bunch about addiction. So he was addicted specifically to like collecting CDs. Like back in the day, he just bought like thousands of CDs, and that was his thing. And he says he links it back to like when he was a kid he was like a baby in the Holocaust. And he says his mother gave him up to a stranger to survive for a few weeks. And as a baby, this like super traumatized him. And yeah, like he kind of links trauma to like addiction in this really big way. So, I mean, that it's just very on point I would love to hear you talk to him at some point. I'm sure you will.
Yeah, I have more leveling up to do, but maybe I think 2025 is slated to be the year I start doing this a lot more. And I really appreciate this. Yeah.
You seem very easygoing on camera and easy to talk to. I'm like, it seems so natural. It doesn't even, sometimes when people learn to speak or they learn something, it seems like they're at first like trying on techniques and you can kind of see through, but it just seems so natural for you. You just seem vivacious.
Oh, well, thank you. I definitely got pretty nervous a few times. I definitely caught myself losing my train of thought when I started to feel like so consistently my biggest blocker is just being afraid of taking up too much space. Do people even want to be hearing me, kind of like making myself small? That's it keeps being the thing that's like getting in the way of doing these exercises well. And I caught myself doing that a few times where I just be like, oh, I've been talking for so long. I have to like wrap this up. And then I would like forget what I was saying. But we're working on
a guest on a podcast. I like it. You're like, does this person interviewing me for the podcast want to hear what I have to say?
We're working on it.
I got it. I understand on a podcast because it's harder to, again, like read body language, but in person, do you get the same thing?
Yeah.
Because I mean, okay.
Yeah. I think part of it too is just that, I mean, I could talk for so long about these stories and sometimes people really want to hear them. And then sometimes people are being polite and I'm just going on and on and on. And I, it's sometimes hard for me to tell which is the case. And then also I'm just generally working through some things about confidence.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, for sure. Okay. I think a while ago I learned how to figure out mostly how interested people were. And I think it's something like, are they leaning towards me? Are they like making eye contact? Like, there's just this like, how much attention are they paying? If they pull out their phone, I'm like, okay, I better change topics here.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I think I just watch people a lot. Very interesting. Okay, cool. I think it might be time to wrap up. I'm very satisfied. I have been interested this entire time. Like, this has been a journey. You have the hero's journey of the story right now.
Yeah, this has been a blast. Thank you so much. I got interviewed by a couple of friends with podcasts about my history a couple of years ago. So I did a few of them, it's been a while, and also this was just really fun. I remember those being like probably a little bit more nerve wracking, and I was not quite as used to doing recorded calls and things like that. But this one I just had a blast. So thank you so much, and I love your presence. It's just very like sometimes I would ground myself by watching you and listening to your voice, and this has just been super fun. I love it.
Amazing. Where can people find you?
Oh, Twitter, obviously. I am GPT Brooke with an E on the end, and I have to say, because I do get a little self-conscious. I joined Twitter in 2020. It was just after GPT-3 came out, and I didn't know. I had never really been on social media. I didn't know. I was kind of like, I don't know that I'm actually autistic, but I'm like too like autistic to like to write out LOL because I wasn't literally laughing out loud, and I didn't really know how to use emojis. And so I would try to
just honest.
I would try to write in my speaking voice, and I had two different people jokingly ask if I was GPT-4 because I sounded robotic, which I thought was hilarious because I'm actually quite animated, as you can see. So I made my handle GPT Brooke, and then like 2 years later, ChatGPT came out and everything got really popular. But I was in before. It's cool. I just need people to know that. That's all.
It's a great name. Yeah, fantastic.
Now I'm kind of stuck with it.
That's all right. It's a good handle. It's memorable. That's important.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope to talk to you later. I hope to see you at one of the camps in the near future.
Great. This has been really lovely. I really appreciate you giving me this opportunity and taking this time and being so much fun.
Thank you for coming. All right. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Oh, end session for off.